The human officer walked through the long metallic hallway of the alien station. The lights above flickered in a strange rhythm, almost like the heartbeat of something alive. He had been on this station for 3 weeks, sent as part of a trade, delegation, and during that time he had only spoken to the alien leaders during formal meetings. He never expected anything unusual, until the message arrived. It was not from the High Council, nor from the military leaders. It was from a tiny, alien envoy barely half his height, with delicate silver skin and large glowing eyes. The message was short and simple, but the weight of it pressed into his mind. She had written, "Come to my quarters tonight, human. This is important for cultural exchange." He read those words, again and again, wondering what they really meant. Cultural exchange could mean anything, rituals, traditions, or even hidden negotiations. But the envoy had been nervous earlier that day, her eyes darting around the room during the council meeting. She looked like someone carrying a secret too heavy for her shoulders. When the hour came, he walked to the section of the station reserved for alien envoys. The guards watched him closely, their expressions unreadable. None of them stopped him, as if they already knew of her request. That made his chest tighten. This was either an accepted custom or a dangerous trap. Her quarters were small, far different from the Grand Council chambers. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and the envoy stood inside, waiting. She was tiny, fragile, yet there was a strange power in the way she carried herself. Her glowing eyes fixed on him as if she had been waiting her whole life for this moment. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. Her voice was soft, like water flowing in a quiet stream. She gestured for him to step inside. The door sealed shut behind him, leaving them in a chamber filled with faint blue light. Strange patterns glowed on the walls, symbols that looked like half art, half warning. The officer tried to keep his voice calm. "Your message said cultural exchange. What does that mean?" he asked. The envoy lowered her head, as if ashamed. She walked to a table in the center of the room. On it lay 2 bowls filled with liquid that shimmered like melted stars. She pushed one bowl toward him. "It begins with sharing," she said. "You drink, then I drink. That is the first step of trust in my culture." He hesitated. The liquid glowed faintly, giving off a warmth he could feel even from a distance. Was it safe, or was it poison? He remembered the way her eyes had pleaded with him during the council. Something told him this was more than just ritual. Slowly, he lifted the bowl and brought it to his lips. The taste was unlike anything he had known. Sweet but sharp, like fire and ice together. His heart raced. The envoy watched closely, and when he finished, she took her own bowl and drank. Her trembling hand steadied as she swallowed the liquid. "Now, you are part of me," she whispered. "And I am part of you." The words made the officer's skin prickle. What did she mean by that? Before he could ask, she motioned for him to sit across from her. Her face was serious, no trace of a smile. "I invited you here because I trust humans," she said. "Your kind is said to be fearless, not bound by the same chains that hold others. I need that. Courage now because I am not safe." Her words hung in the air like a blade. The officer leaned forward, his instincts on edge. "Not safe, what do you mean?" She looked around the room as if the walls themselves had ears. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They are watching me. They do not believe in my loyalty. They think I am too weak to serve as envoy. If they prove me unworthy, they will remove me and I will disappear." The officer's stomach turned. He realized this was not simply about food, drink, or tradition. She had risked everything by calling him here. This so-called cultural exchange was a cover, a way to speak to him without raising suspicion. Before he could answer, the lights flickered sharply. Shadows danced across the walls. The envoy froze, her eyes widening with fear. "They are listening," she whispered. "We do not have much time." The officer's pulse quickened. He felt as if he had stepped into a trap that was closing around him, but he could see the desperation in her eyes, the silent plea for help. He understood now. This invitation was not about culture, it was about survival. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence was heavy, filled only with the low hum of the station. Then the envoy reached across the table and gripped his hand, with surprising strength. Her small fingers were cold, trembling, yet determined. "Please," she said. "Stay, listen, and when the time comes, protect me." The officer looked at her, at the fear mixed with hope in her glowing eyes. He had come here expecting an odd ritual, maybe a strange alien tradition. Instead, he had found a secret that could shake the fragile peace of this station. He knew one thing for certain. His life had just changed, and whatever came next would not be simple cultural exchange. It would be a fight for truth, trust, and survival. The human officer sat in silence across from the tiny alien envoy. Her trembling hand had just released his, and her words still echoed in his ears. "Stay, listen, and when the time comes, protect me." He could feel the weight of her desperation, heavier than the metallic walls that surrounded them. He wanted to ask more, but before he could, she stood and moved to a cabinet built into the wall. From it, she pulled a small tray carrying several objects. None of them looked familiar. They were strange. Shards of crystal, feathers from creatures he had never seen, and a mask carved from a dark stone that seemed to drink in the light. "These," she said softly, "are the tools of exchange. Each envoy must offer them to a chosen partner." Her voice carried both pride and sadness, as if the tradition meant something sacred, but also dangerous. She placed the items gently on the table between them. The officer leaned closer, examining them. The crystals glowed faintly, pulsing like slow heartbeats. The feathers shimmered with colors that changed when he blinked. The mask, however, remained, lifeless, dark, and heavy. "What do I do with them?" he asked. She met his eyes, her glowing irises reflecting the blue light of the room. "You must choose one," she said, "and return it to me in your own way. That act tells me who you are. It tells me how deep the bond of trust will go." Her words sounded like ritual, but her tone was more personal. She wasn't following a script, she was testing him. The officer hesitated. He could sense the danger behind a wrong choice. He reached out and touched the crystal shard, warmth spreading into his fingertips. But before he could lift it, the envoy shook her head quickly. "Not that one," she whispered. Her voice carried a tremor. "It is not safe for you." He pulled back, his heartbeat steady but tense. "Then why offer it?" he asked. She lowered her gaze. "Because tradition demands it. But I do not want you harmed. Already the others question me. If they see you choose the wrong gift, they will use it against me." Her honesty struck him. Deeper than the ritual, this wasn't about cultural exchange. It was a warning wrapped in ceremony. After a pause, he picked up the feather. It was lighter than air, almost floating in his hand. The shifting colors danced across his skin like liquid fire. He turned it toward her. "Then this," he said firmly. Her eyes softened, and for the first time she smiled. A faint, fragile smile. "The feather means hope," she said quietly. "You are willing to believe in what cannot be explained. That gives me strength." She placed her hand over his, guiding the feather back into the tray. Then, with ritual care, she lifted the dark mask and set it before him. The air grew colder. "And this," she whispered, "is what they want me to wear when I stand before the council. They say the mask hides weakness, but it also hides truth." He stared at the mask, unease twisting in his chest. "And if you refuse to wear it?" he asked. Her voice dropped. Lower, trembling. "Then I disappear." The officer leaned back, piecing it together. The so-called customs were not just harmless traditions. They were chains, symbols used by her own people to measure loyalty and silence those who did not obey. Before he could respond, a soft chime rang from the wall. The envoy stiffened, rushing to silence it. "They are checking on me," she whispered. "Do not speak." She pressed a panel and the wall shimmered, revealing a glowing screen. On it appeared the face of another alien, taller, older, eyes sharp and cold. The voice was deep, commanding. "Envoy, are you alone?" Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Yes, counselor. I am preparing for tomorrow's ritual." The counselor's eyes narrowed, scanning the room as if he could see through the walls. "Be ready," he said. "This exchange must not fail. If you show weakness, Your bloodline will end here. The screen went dark. The officer exhaled slowly, tension thick in his chest. The envoy stood frozen, her small frame shaking. He rose and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You risk everything by meeting me, he said. Why me? Why not one of your own? She turned to him, her glowing eyes filled with sorrow. Because they would never help me, she whispered. Only you would see me for what I am, not what they want me to be. For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the hum of the station echoed around them. The officer realized that this was no longer just her fight. By accepting her invitation, he had stepped into a web of lies and danger. Then the envoy reached into her robe and pulled out a small piece of folded cloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a fragment of paper, ancient, torn, with strange markings. This, she said, is the real reason I called you here. It is not part of any ritual. It is a message, a warning, hidden for generations. Only a human can read it. She placed it in his hand, and the faint letters began to shift, aligning into words he could understand. His breath caught. The paper said, "Beware the council. They plan war." His heart pounded, his mind raced. This was no cultural exchange. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that could ignite the galaxy. The envoy looked at him with fear and hope mixed together. Now you see why I needed you, she whispered. This is not only about me. It is about all of us. The officer clenched the paper, feeling its weight like a blade in his hand. He had come here expecting strange customs. Instead, he had uncovered a secret that could change everything. And now, there was no turning back. The human officer stared at the fragile piece of paper in his hand. The words shimmered faintly, shifting into English letters only he could understand. Beware the council. They plan war. His chest tightened as he read the message again. Each letter seemed to pulse with danger. The tiny envoy sat across from him, her glowing eyes fixed on his face. She looked frightened, but also relieved. You can read it, can't you? She whispered. Her small voice trembled. Yes, he answered, slowly. It warns of war, her eyes closed, as if a heavy truth had finally been spoken aloud. I feared it was true, she murmured. The council hides much. They use us envoys as tools, puppets. We are told it is cultural exchange, but behind every ritual is a command. Behind every smile is a chain. The officer turned the paper over. His hands felt the rough texture of the old material. Unlike the cold metal of the station, it carried warmth almost like skin. This was not something that belonged to technology. It was older, ancient, perhaps forbidden. Where did you get this? He asked. Her gaze shifted nervously to the glowing symbols on the wall. It was hidden here long before I arrived, tucked behind the stones. I found it by accident during my first week. When I touched it, the words changed. But only for a moment. I couldn't read them. So I waited. I prayed for someone who could. Her small hands clenched into fists. When the humans came, I knew it had to be one of you. Only your kind can make the letters speak. That is why. I invited you here. I had no other choice. The officer's mind raced. Why would ancient warnings be written in human language? Humanity was new to the galactic stage, barely decades into space travel. Yet this message seemed to know them, expect them. Before he could ask more, the envoy leaned forward, lowering her voice. There is more, she said. The message is only the first part. She reached for the mask on the tray and pressed her fingers along its edge. A faint click echoed, and a hidden compartment opened. Inside lay another fragment. Darker, torn, and brittle, she handed it to him carefully. Her hands shook as though she feared even touching it too long. He unfolded it, and again the letters twisted into words he could understand. The council fears humanity. They will strike first. Do not trust their gifts. Do not drink their peace. His stomach nodded. He remembered the glowing liquid he had swallowed earlier, the warmth that had spread through his body. Was it only ritual? Or was it something worse? The envoy watched his face pale. "Now you understand," she whispered. "Nothing here is as it seems. They test us, they poison us slowly to see who bends, who breaks. You must fight it, human. You must not let them control you." He placed the fragments carefully on the table, his voice steady though his heart pounded. "If what this says is true, then humanity is already in danger." She nodded, tears welling in her glowing eyes. "And so am I," she whispered. "If they discover I shared this with you, they will erase me. No envoy who betrays the council lives." The officer leaned forward, lowering his tone. "Then why take this risk?" Her lips quivered, but her gaze was firm. "Because I believe in you," she said. "I have seen how your kind speaks freely, how you defy rules. I envy that. My people bow their heads, but you humans lift your eyes. That is why the council fears you. That is why I trust you." The room fell silent. Only the hum of the station filled the air. The officer studied her. Wait, she was small, fragile, but in her eyes burned a courage that outshone her size. Suddenly, the walls flickered again. A faint pulse of red light spread across the chamber. The envoy gasped, grabbing his wrist. "They are scanning my quarters," she hissed. "Hide." It quickly. He shoved the fragments into his jacket, pressing them close to his chest. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, shifting into patterns like eyes, watching, searching. The envoy stood, her small body tense. "Sit still," she ordered in a whisper. "Do not move, do not speak." A low hum filled the chamber, then a voice echoed from the walls, cold and sharp. "Envoy, who is with you?" The officer's blood froze. He glanced at her. Her expression hardened. She stepped forward and bowed to the glowing wall. "I am alone, honored council," she said with surprising calm. "Alone?" The voice repeated, suspicious. "Then why do our sensors detect 2 heartbeats?" The envoy's lips parted, fear flashing in her eyes. But she spoke quickly. "Because I was practicing the bonding ritual. It requires a second rhythm. I use my own echo." There was a long silence. The officer's pulse thundered in his ears. Finally, the voice replied, "Do not fail tomorrow, Envoy. Your entire station watches." The glow vanished and the walls dimmed back to blue. The envoy sagged, her knees trembling. He caught her before she fell. Her small frame shook violently. "That was close," she whispered. "Too close." He held her steady, his mind spinning. The fragments in his jacket felt like burning coal. If the council discovered them, both he and the envoy were finished. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes wet with tears. "You must choose, human," she whispered. "Leave me now and live, or stay and uncover the truth. But if you stay, we may both die." Her words cut into him like a blade. He had come here expecting a strange dinner, a harmless ritual. Instead, he now held proof of conspiracy, betrayal, and the shadow of war. He looked at her trembling form, so small, so fragile, yet braver than many warriors he had met. He knew his choice even before she asked. "I stay," he said firmly. "Whatever this is, we face it together." "Lori." Envoy's tears fell, but her lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time that night, hope flickered in the air, fragile yet alive. The chamber was silent after the council's voice faded. The envoy stood trembling, her small hands clutching the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The human officer stayed close, his heart still pounding from the narrow escape. They had lied to the council, and for now it had worked. But he could feel the walls closing in around them. The envoy lifted her head, her glowing eyes filled with both fear and resolve. "They will test me," she whispered. "They always test those they doubt, and tonight they will come sooner than expected." The officer frowned. "Test you how?" Her lips trembled before she spoke. "They will send shadows," she said. "Assassins, not soldiers. Their task is not to kill me outright, but to break me. If I cry for help, if I show weakness, the council will know. They will say I am unfit, but if I survive, they will allow me to remain envoy." He clenched his fists, anger rising inside. Him. That's not a test, that's a trap. She nodded slowly. Yes, but I cannot run. Tradition demands I face it. If I flee, they will destroy my entire family line. I must stand. The officer studied her trembling frame, so small and fragile compared to the threat she described. He knew in his gut that she could not survive this alone. Whatever cultural exchange had begun between them had now turned into something far more dangerous. A faint sound echoed through the corridor outside. Soft, like footsteps muffled. By shadow, the envoy's eyes widened. She looked at him quickly. It has begun, she whispered. You must not interfere. If they see you fight for me, they will claim I cheated, and we both will die. The officer gritted his teeth, torn. Between duty and instinct, his training told him to fight to protect, but her words reminded him that one wrong move could doom them both. The door slid open with a slow hiss, the chamber filled with a strange cold air. 3 figures stepped inside, tall and thin, their bodies covered in dark cloaks that seemed to absorb the light. Their faces were hidden behind masks that glowed faintly red. They moved like predators, silent, graceful. The envoy straightened, though her body shook. She raised her chin and spoke in a steady voice. I welcome the test. One of the shadowed figures stepped forward, its voice a low hiss, then survive. Without warning, the first figure lunged, moving faster than human eyes could follow. The envoy dodged clumsily, barely avoiding the strike. The second figure swung low and she stumbled, falling hard against the table. The officer's hands itched to grab his weapon, but he forced himself to stay still. He remembered her warning: if he fought, it was over. This was her trial, not his. Still, watching her small body struggle against these trained shadows tore at him like fire. The envoy crawled to her feet, her glowing eyes blazing with determination. She grabbed one of the crystal shards from the tray and held it out like a blade. The figures circled her, their movements slow now, mocking, testing. She swung the shard wildly, the light slicing through the air. It barely slowed them, but her courage was clear. Her voice rang out, trembling yet strong. I will not bow. The officer felt something stir deep inside him. He realized this was more than survival. This was her proving she was worthy, not only to her council but to herself. The first figure struck again, this time harder. The envoy stumbled back, blood glowing faintly against her silver skin. She gasped, but did not fall. She held the shard tighter, her hands shaking. The officer's jaw clenched. He couldn't stand back forever. Even if it cost him his life, he could not let her be destroyed. He took one slow step forward, careful to stay in the shadows of the chamber. If they forced his hand, he would act, no matter the price. The envoy's eyes flicked toward him. Just for a second, she shook her head sharply, as if begging him not to intervene. Then, with sudden fierceness, she turned and slashed the shard across the mask of the nearest figure. The crystal cracked, but so did the mask. Sparks burst out as the figure stumbled back with a guttural hiss. The other 2 figures froze, then looked at one another. Their cloaks rippled as if alive. They had not expected her to strike. They had not expected her to fight. Her small chest heaved with breath. She stood taller now, her voice stronger. I am Envoy, she said. I do not break. The officer's heart swelled. He saw her not as fragile or tiny, but as fierce, braver than any warrior he had met. The shadows hissed again, but then, as quickly as they came, they retreated, their cloaks swirling as they vanished into the doorway. The chamber fell silent once more. The envoy dropped the shard, her legs buckling. The officer rushed forward this time, catching her before she hit the ground. She leaned against him, exhausted, blood shimmering on her skin. You passed, he whispered. Her lips curled into the faintest smile. No, she breathed. We passed. She reached weakly toward his jacket, her fingers brushing the hidden fragments. The council thinks I survived because of tradition, but the truth is bigger, human. The message you carry is the real test, and it has only begun. The officer tightened his grip on her, lifting her carefully. He knew now that this was no simple game. This was a war of secrets, and the envoy had chosen him as her only ally. As the chamber lights flickered back to normal, he realized something chilling. The council had not tested her to see if she was strong. They had tested her to see if she would reveal him, and though they had left, he knew they would be watching even closer now. The first test was over, but the real battle was only beginning. The chamber still carried the echo of the Shadow's departure. The human officer held the tiny Envoy in his arms, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her glowing eyes fluttered shut for a moment, but then she forced them open again, refusing to appear weak even now. "You should rest," he whispered. But she shook her head quickly. "No. There is no time," she murmured. "The first test is over, but the council will not stop. They will set more traps, more lies. If we are not prepared, both of us will be lost." The officer placed her gently on the low bench near the wall. He crouched beside her, searching her face. "Then we face it, together," he said firmly. Her lips curved faintly, almost into a smile. "Together," she repeated softly. The words seemed to give her strength. She reached under the bench and pressed a hidden latch. A section of the floor shifted with a mechanical click, revealing a narrow opening. Faint air drifted upward, carrying a smell of dust and age. "This station is built with more than the council admits," she whispered. "There are tunnels, ancient ones that run beneath the Envoy quarters. They lead to places the council forbids us to see." The officer peered into the dark opening. The space below was tight, barely wide enough for one person at a time. "You've been down there before," he guessed. The Envoy shook her head, her silver skin pale in the blue light. "No, I was afraid. Alone I could not face what lies below, but with you, maybe we can." He nodded without hesitation. "Then we go." They slipped into the tunnel, sealing the hatch behind them. The air grew colder as they descended. The walls were carved from stone rather than metal, etched with the same strange markings that had glowed in her quarters. But here the symbols were old, faded, as if abandoned long ago. The Envoy's small hand brushed the carvings as she whispered, "These are not council-made. They are older than our people. Some say the first envoys left them as warnings. Others say they belonged to another race altogether." The officer's mind raced. Humanity was new to the galactic stage, yet everywhere he turned he found threads that seemed to tie back to them. The fragments, the messages, and now these ancient tunnels. It felt less like coincidence and more like design. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. At its center stood a pedestal of black stone. On it rested a crystal sphere glowing faintly with inner light. The Envoy gasped softly. "It's real," she whispered. They stepped closer. The officer could feel a hum in the air, like the vibration of a distant engine. The Envoy reached out but stopped, her fingers trembling. "I've heard of this place," she said. "The Sphere of Witness. It is said to record truth. Every lie told by the council, every secret hidden by the envoys. If the council knew I had found this, they would end me at once." The officer studied her face, seeing both awe and fear. "Then why risk showing me?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him, her glowing eyes wide and honest. "Because you are already part of this, human. You drank their poison, you saw their shadows, you carry the fragments. If I fall, you must carry the truth. You must show the galaxy what they are." He clenched, his fists feeling the weight of her trust. "Then I swear it," he said. "I will stand with you. I won't let them silence you." The Envoy stepped forward and pressed her palm against the sphere. It flared with light, the chamber filling with images, council members in secret rooms, plans of fleets hidden in the dark, whispers of betrayal, and among them, again and again, appeared the same word: human. The officer felt his breath catch. "They've been planning for us," he muttered. The Envoy nodded, her small frame tense. "They fear your kind. They fear what you will become. That is why they test me, why they poison you. They want to know if humanity can be broken before the war begins." The officer stepped beside her, placing his hand over hers on the sphere. The light shifted, the images changed. This time it showed him standing where he was now, beside her. Their faces reflected together in the glow. A single line of text appeared beneath. Alliance forged. The envoy gasped, her hand tightening on his. It recognizes us, she whispered. The sphere does not lie, it records truth, and now it has written ours. He turned to her, his voice steady. Then we are bound. She nodded, tears forming in her glowing eyes. Yes, human, we are bound. For the first time since stepping onto the alien station, the officer felt a strange clarity. He was not simply a visitor, not just an observer. He was part of something far greater. A partnership that could shift the balance of power in the galaxy. But as the sphere dimmed, the chamber trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. The envoy's face went pale. They know, she whispered. The council knows we've touched it. The officer drew her close, his instincts sharp. Then we fight our way out. Her small voice was firm. No, we survive our way out. Their alliance was no longer just words, it was truth, carved into the sphere itself. And now, both of them knew. The council would never forgive it. The human and the tiny envoy stood side by side in the glowing chamber. Their paths forever joined, and as the walls shook around them, they prepared for what came next. Together. The ancient chamber shook with low rumbling as the sphere's glow faded. The human officer steadied the tiny envoy, holding her close as dust fell from the ceiling. Her glowing eyes darted toward the tunnel behind them. We must leave now, she whispered. They hurried back through the narrow passage, the echo of the sphere's hum still lingering in the air like a warning. Every step felt heavier. Every shadow felt alive. When they finally reached the hidden hatch in her quarters, the envoy sealed it quickly, pressing her small hand against the wall until the markings dimmed. For a brief moment, silence returned. The envoy leaned against the wall, breathing fast. The sphere saw us, she whispered. It declared our alliance, that truth will spread through the station soon, and the council will not allow it. The officer nodded, his jaw tight. Then we prepare for them. But before either could move, the door to her quarters slid open. 2 alien guards stepped inside, their tall frames casting long shadows in the blue light. They were not strangers. These were her own assigned protectors, the ones who had watched. Her everyday envoy, one said, his voice cold. The council requests your presence. Her body stiffened. Her glowing eyes flickered toward the officer, then back to the guards. It is late, she answered carefully. I will come at dawn. The second guard's lips curled into something sharp, almost a sneer. No, you will come now. His gaze slid to the officer. And the human will not accompany you, the officer's instincts screamed. He stepped forward, blocking their path. She is not going anywhere without me, he said firmly. The guards' hands shifted toward the weapons at their belts. Their eyes glowed faint red beneath their helmets. Do not interfere, human, the first hissed. This is Envoy business. The envoy's small voice trembled. Stop, she said quickly. I will go with you, just do not harm him. The officer turned to her, shock flickering across his face. You can't trust them, he whispered. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw both fear and guilt. I have no choice, she whispered back. If I resist, they will kill us both. The guards moved forward, taking her by the arms. She did not struggle. Her tiny form seemed even smaller between their towering frames. As they dragged her out, she looked over her shoulder at the officer, her lips forming a silent word. Wait. The door sealed shut, leaving him in the chamber alone. The silence pressed heavy against his chest. He paced the floor, fury and worry twisting inside him. He wanted to storm after her, but he knew it would only make things worse. He had to be patient. He had to trust her. Hours passed. The station lights shifted to night cycle, yet he could not sleep. His thoughts kept returning to the sphere's message, the fragments hidden in his jacket, and the envoy's frightened eyes as she was taken. Finally, the door opened again. The envoy returned, but something was different. She walked slowly, her glowing eyes downcast. Her guards left her at the threshold and sealed the door behind her. He rushed to her side. "What did they do?" he asked. She flinched at his voice, as though it cut deeper than any blade. She lifted her gaze, and he saw tears shimmering there. "They know," she whispered. "They know about the tunnels, about the sphere." The officer's blood ran cold. "Then why are you still alive?" Her small hands trembled as she reached toward him. "Because I betrayed you," she whispered. The words struck him like a physical blow. He stepped back, staring at her in disbelief. "What did you say?" Tears slid down her silver cheeks, glowing faintly in the dim light. "They gave me no choice," she said, her voice breaking. "If I denied them, they would erase my bloodline. They promised to spare me if I delivered you to them." The officer's chest tightened. His instincts told him to be angry, to rage, but when he looked at her trembling form, he saw not a traitor, but a prisoner, bound by fear and chains he could not see. "You told them about me?" he asked. Quietly, her lips shook. "Yes," she admitted. "But I did not tell them everything. I hid the fragments. I did not reveal the sphere's final message. I gave them only enough to survive." The officer closed his eyes, breathing hard. Betrayal burned like fire, but beneath it was something else. A strange, bitter understanding. She had sacrificed his safety for her people, but even then she had tried to protect him in part. Before he could speak, the walls glowed red. The council's voice filled the chamber. "Human, you are summoned. The envoy has proven her loyalty. Now you must prove yours." The envoy dropped to her knees, clutching his arm. "Please forgive me," she whispered. "I could not protect you, but perhaps together we can still survive." The officer looked down at her, his jaw tight. His heart warred between anger and compassion. She had betrayed him, yes, but only because the council had left her no choice. And in the end, she had given him a chance to fight back. He lifted her to her feet, his voice steady. "Then we go," he said. "But this time we do not walk into their trap as prey, we walk in as allies." Her eyes widened, hope flickering through her tears. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt strength return to her. The council wanted submission. They wanted fear instead. They would get defiance. Together, the human and the tiny envoy stepped toward the door. Their alliance had been tested, broken, and reforged, and now, with betrayal hanging over them like a blade, they prepared to face the council, side by side. The human officer and the tiny envoy walked side by side toward the council chamber. The heavy doors loomed ahead, glowing with sharp lines of red light. The envoy's small hand brushed against his, as if to remind herself he was real, alive, and still beside her. She had betrayed him once, but now she walked with him again. Not as a servant of the council, but as his ally. The doors slid open, revealing the vast chamber filled with towering figures. The council sat on high seats carved from obsidian stone, their glowing eyes piercing the room like blades. The air was thick with silence, heavy with judgment. The first counselor leaned forward, his voice cold and sharp. "Envoy, you have confessed your weakness. Yet you have chosen survival. For that we spared you, but now the human must prove his worth. This is the true exchange." The envoy lowered her head, her small frame trembling. The officer, however, stood tall, his eyes scanning the chamber. He saw no kindness in their faces, only suspicion and hunger for control. Another counselor spoke, her voice like a hiss. "Human, you were invited here for cultural exchange. You ate our food, you touched our symbols, you entered our envoys' quarters. But tell us, what did you learn of us?" The officer's lips tightened. He thought of the poisoned drink, the shadows, the betrayal, and the sphere of witness that had shown him truth. He could speak lies and please them, or speak truth and risk both their lives. His eyes met the envoy's glowing gaze, and he saw her silent plea, "Do not bow." He stepped forward, his voice steady. "I learned that your culture is not about exchange. It is about chains. You test, you poison, you silence, You hide war behind rituals. You use fear as your language. The chamber stirred, low whispers rising like snakes hissing. The envoy's breath caught. Her people had never spoken this way before the council. Yet the human's words did not stop. But I also learned something else, he continued, his voice firm. This envoy, though tiny and fragile in your eyes, has more courage than all your shadows combined. She stood against assassins. She carried truth in her hands, and she trusted me when no one else would. If your council is blind to that, then your chains will break sooner than you think. The chamber erupted with noise, voices rising in outrage. The councillors pounded their seats, demanding silence. The envoy's heart raced. She had expected death for such words, but instead she felt fire in her chest. Hope, the first councillor, rose, his towering frame casting long shadows. You dare accuse us, human? You dare claim alliance with one of ours? The officer met his gaze without flinching. Yes, he said simply. I do. At that moment, the envoy stepped forward, her small hands clenched, her glowing eyes burning with defiance. And so do I, she said, her voice ringing clear. The human speaks truth. He is not my prisoner, nor my test. He is my ally. He is my proof that trust exists beyond fear. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Never had an envoy spoken against the council so openly. The officer could see the councillors' fury rising, but he also saw uncertainty. Their control had cracked, even if only for a moment. The walls of the chamber shimmered suddenly. The sphere of witness appeared in the air as a projection, its light spreading across the room. The images it carried spilled before everyone. The shadows attacking, the envoy's courage, the betrayal, the human's choice to stay. And at the end, the final words burned across the chamber walls. Alliance forged. The councillors froze, their whispers silenced. The sphere was ancient, undeniable. It recorded truth beyond manipulation. And now the truth was plain for all to see. The envoy's voice trembled but did not falter. You wanted cultural exchange, here it is. Not food or masks or poison, but trust. That is the true exchange, and you cannot erase it. The officer stepped beside her, his voice steady. We do not come as enemies, but neither will we bow if you choose war with humanity. Know this. We will not break. The chamber fell into silence so heavy it pressed against the skin. The councillors' glowing eyes shifted. Between one another they had wanted obedience, but instead they had received defiance. They had wanted fear, but instead they were given truth. Finally, the first councillor's voice rumbled low. The sphere has spoken. The exchange is sealed. We cannot deny what is written. His eyes burned with fury, but his words carried reluctant acceptance. Go then, envoy. Go with your human, but know this. The day will come when your choice demands a price. The doors opened behind them, light spilling into the chamber. The envoy turned to the officer, her small hand finding his. Her glowing eyes shimmered with tears, but also with strength. We survived, she whispered. He squeezed her hand gently. No, he said softly. We began. Together they stepped, out of the council chamber, leaving behind whispers of war, chains of tradition, and the shadows of betrayal. Ahead of them lay uncertainty, danger, and perhaps a galaxy against them. But for the first time, they faced it not as strangers, not as captor and guest, but as allies bound by